My name is Seth Calloway. I'm 33. I install custom cabinetry for a small firm that does residential renovations, which means I spend most of my working hours in other people's kitchens measuring things twice and cutting once, and listening to true crime podcasts through one earbud, while the other ear stays available for whatever the homeowner needs to tell me about the original contractor who did everything wrong. It is not a glamorous life. It is a precise one which suits me. I had been with Dana Reyes for 2 years. We ended in April, on a Sunday, with the particular civility of two people who have stopped being in love but are still in the habit of being kind to each other. There was no villain in the story. There rarely is in the endings that hurt the most. She said she thought we'd stopped growing toward each other. I said I thought she was right. We sat with that for a moment, and then she cried a little, and I didn't. And I drove home and sat in my apartment and ate cereal at 10 at night and thought about how quiet the correct decisions can be. That was 8 months before Carol Reyes called me on a Thursday afternoon in December. Carol was Dana's mother. She was 58, ran a small alterations business out of a shop on the east side of town, and had the particular quality of certain women of her generation who have raised children and managed difficult things and come out the other side with an economy of expression and zero tolerance for anything that wastes time. She spoke in complete sentences. Always. She made decisions and then acted on them, and the acting was swift and unbothered by second thoughts. She and I had gotten along from the beginning, which I always understood was not automatic. She had watched me carefully the first year and then, somewhere in the second, stopped watching and started simply including, which I took as the higher compliment. When Dana and I ended, Carol had called me once, not to assign blame, not to debrief, just to say that she was sorry and that she had always found me to be a good man, and she hoped I knew that. I had thought about that call more than once in the 8 months since. She called on a Thursday and said she had a problem. She was redecorating her spare bedroom. Painting, new furniture, the full reset, and the new dresser had arrived, and the delivery men had put it in the living room because they don't carry things upstairs. She said this with the tone of a woman who has formed a permanent opinion about delivery men, and she needed it moved to the second floor and into the correct room, and there was a tight corner on the landing she wasn't sure about. She said, "I know you're busy. I know this is an imposition." I said it wasn't. She said, "You're good with tight corners." I said I'd come Saturday morning. I told myself this was a simple thing, a favor for a woman I liked and respected, who had treated me well, who needed furniture moved. I am a person who helps when asked. That is a character trait, not a strategy. I told myself this on Thursday evening. I told myself again on Friday. By Saturday morning, I had told myself enough times that I recognized the pattern, which is the pattern of a man who is trying to convince himself of something he hasn't fully settled. It was Dana's mother. We were going to move a dresser. I parked outside Carol's house at 9 in the morning. It was a cold Saturday, the kind December makes as a matter of policy, and her front walk had been shoveled with the thoroughness of a woman who does not leave things half done. There was a wreath on the door. There was a smell of coffee from somewhere inside when she opened it. She looked the same. Of course she did. It had been 8 months, not 8 years. She had her reading glasses pushed up on her head and paint on her left forearm in the pale yellow of the spare room, visible when she reached up to hold the door open. "Seth," she said, "come in." We stood in her kitchen the way you stand in a kitchen you know well when you haven't been in it for a while. Comfortable and slightly careful at the same time. She asked about work. I asked about the shop. She said business was good, that the holidays always brought in alterations, that people bought formal things in November and then immediately needed them taken in or let out. She said this with the mild satisfaction of someone whose expertise is in constant demand. The dresser was in the living room as described. It was a solid piece, dark wood, 6 drawers, the kind built to last 40 years if you don't drop it down a staircase. We assessed the landing corner together. I said I thought it would go if we angled the approach correctly. She said she had thought the same but wasn't certain. I said I'd done tighter corners. We moved it in 4 passes, which is 2 fewer than I expected. Carol was not decorative help. She anticipated the pivot point each time before I asked, held her side at the right height, moved when I needed her to move, and stopped when I needed her to stop. She had the spatial intelligence of someone who has rearranged rooms alone many times and understands that furniture is a geometry problem. We set it against the wall. I stood up straight and looked at it. She stood beside me and looked at it. Good corner, she said. Good corner, I agreed. She left to get water. I looked around the room, pale yellow walls, still smelling of paint, a new rug rolled up against the baseboard not yet laid, a small framed print leaning against the wall waiting to be hung. A room being made over from scratch, the way you sometimes need to redo a space before you can inhabit it differently. Carol came back with 2 glasses of water and handed me one. She looked at the dresser, then at the window, then at me. She set her glass down on the windowsill. Then she went to the door of the room and closed it. Not urgently, deliberately. The click of the latch was very clear in the quiet house. She turned around. We need to talk, she said. I want to be accurate about what happened in my chest at that moment. It was not alarm exactly. It was the physiological version of a person standing at the top of a staircase in the dark, knowing they were about to descend, not knowing how many steps. Okay, I said. She sat down on the edge of the bare mattress and looked at me with the expression she uses when she is about to say something that has been prepared, not rehearsed for performance, prepared for honesty. I'm going to tell you something, she said, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Can you do that? Yes, I said. Dana is seeing someone, she said. Has been since August. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because it's relevant and you deserve to have the full picture before I say what I'm going to say next. She paused. I also think you already knew in some way. You're a perceptive person. I had not known. I felt something shift in me. Not grief exactly. Not after 8 months. Something more like a door closing properly that had been standing ajar. I kept my face neutral. I didn't know, I said, but thank you for telling me. She nodded once. My daughter is a good woman who made a choice that was right for her and may have been wrong in ways she doesn't fully understand yet. I am her mother, and I love her, and I am not here to conduct her case or argue against it. She met my eyes. I am here because I have a separate opinion that belongs to me and not to her, and I have been sitting on it for 8 months, and I am 58 years old and no longer willing to sit on things. I stayed still. You were the best man my daughter has been with, she said. Not the most exciting, not the most dramatic. The best. You were steady and you were honest, and you showed up when you said you would, and you treated her with a specific kind of respect that I have not always seen men give women, including men who thought they were being respectful. She paused. You also treated me like a person, not the girlfriend's mother, a person. I noticed that. I noticed things. I did not say anything. She had asked me to let her finish. My daughter is not what I want to talk to you about, she said. Not primarily. She picked up her water glass, looked at it, set it down again. I have a friend. Her name is Joanna. She's 41. She's a civil engineer. She's been divorced for 3 years. She has a 9-year-old daughter named Petra, who is the funniest child I have met in my life. And I do not say that as flattery. A small pause. Joanna has been my closest friend for 12 years. I know her character the way I know my own kitchen. I know what she has been through, and I know what she deserves, and I know the kind of man she would do well with. She looked at me directly. I have been thinking about you since April, she said. Not obsessively, just returning to the thought, whether it would be strange, whether it would cause damage, whether Dana would be hurt, or whether in fact she has no ground to stand on given the circumstances. A pause, whether it was my place. And, I said, I decided it was, not to arrange anything or push anything, to say something to you and give you information, and then step back entirely and let it be what it is. She folded her hands in her lap with the composure of a woman who has made a decision and stands behind it. Joanna doesn't know I'm doing this. I want to be clear about that. She would probably be mortified. She would also, I think, not be unhappy about the outcome, which is a sentence I have weighed carefully and mean precisely. She stood up. That's everything, she said. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not telling you this is a good idea or that it will work. I'm telling you that you are a good man who deserves a full life, and I happen to know a woman who is also trying to build one, and I have thought about it for 8 months and decided I would rather say the thing than not say it. The rug still needs to go down if you have another 20 minutes, she said. That is not a romantic story. That is a woman in a half-painted room speaking plainly about something she had prepared for a long time, and then asking if I had 20 minutes for a rug. I know that. I am telling you this because it matters, that the most significant things are sometimes said in rooms that smell of paint, without ceremony, by people who have decided honesty costs less than silence. I helped with the rug. We spoke about other things. She did not revisit what she had said, and neither did I, which was the right call from both of us. She showed me the print she was going to hang, a botanical illustration, irises in dark ink, the kind of thing that looks like it has always belonged in a room. I told her where the light would catch it best. She said she had thought the same. At the door, she gave me a card, Joanna's name on it, her work email, and Carol's handwriting in the corner. Tell her I sent you. She'll know what it means. I drove home and looked at the card for a while. I have poor instincts around moments that require me to do nothing, which meant I had to sit deliberately with the instruction to wait and consider. I considered for 3 days. On the third day, which was a Tuesday, I wrote an email that took 4 drafts, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to say it without performing either confidence I didn't feel or uncertainty I didn't need to announce. I said, "My name is Seth. A mutual friend suggested I reach out. I understand if this is unexpected. I'd welcome the chance to meet for coffee if you're open to it. No pressure in either direction." I sent it at 7 in the evening. She replied at 7:43. She said, "Carol warned me you were straightforward. This is exactly as straightforward as promised. Yes to coffee. Saturday works if it works for you. I want to tell you the coffee was easy. It wasn't, not entirely, a first meeting with a person who knows something about you through someone else, has a particular texture, a negotiation between what's been described and what's actually present. But Joanna was someone who had also stopped having tolerance for anything that wastes time, which meant the first 20 minutes of calibration moved quickly, and by the 30-minute mark we were talking the way you talk when you've forgotten you're supposed to be assessing each other. She was precise and dry and laughed at things I said that I hadn't been certain were funny, which is the specific kind of validation that means something because it can't be manufactured. She talked about Petra the way parents talk about children who have surprised them, with pride that keeps catching her off guard. She said Petra had recently decided to write a dictionary of made-up words and had so far defined 11, including one for the feeling of opening a book to exactly the right page by accident, which Joanna delivered with the straight face of a woman who considers this a serious linguistic project. I said that was a feeling that needed a word. She said Petra had named it Fluke Grace. That landed. We had coffee for 2 hours and then walked for 40 minutes without planning to, which is the sign I have learned to read. She asked about the cabinetry work with genuine curiosity, the kind that asks follow-up questions. I asked about civil engineering and found it more interesting than I had expected, and said so. And she said most people's eyes glaze over at the drainage part, and I had made it to drainage without glazing, which she appreciated. She did not ask about Dana. I did not volunteer anything. Carol's name came up once, briefly, and we both acknowledged the situation with the shorthand of 2 adults who understand that the situation is unusual and have independently decided not to make it strange. She said Carol was a force of nature. I said I had reached the same conclusion in a half-painted spare bedroom. She smiled. I called Carol the next morning. She answered on the second ring. "Well?" she said. I said it had gone well. She said, "I know, she texted me last night." I laughed, the surprised short kind that comes out when you've been caught in the middle of information you thought you were ahead of. She laughed too, the genuine kind, and for a moment she sounded younger than 58. Or maybe 58 just sounds different when someone is pleased. She said, "I'll stay out of it from here." She meant it. She did. I want to say this clearly because the story could suggest otherwise. Carol said what she had to say, and then she stepped back entirely and let it be what it was, which is exactly what she had promised and exactly what made the whole thing possible. Months later, the first time Petra met me, formally with the specific gravity that 9-year-olds bring to assessments, she asked me 3 questions in order. Whether I thought her dictionary was a good idea, whether I knew what fluke race meant, whether I liked dogs, or was I a cat person? And there was a quality to the way she asked the third question that suggested the answer mattered more than the first 2 combined. I said the dictionary was serious work. I said fluke grace was one of the best words I'd heard. I said I liked dogs. She looked at me for a moment with the measuring expression of someone performing due diligence. "Okay," she said, and went back to her book. Joanna, standing behind her, caught my eye with the look that means she is working very hard not to laugh. A year later, when people asked how we met, Joanna said a mutual friend introduced us, which is true and covers all the essential architecture of the story. The full version, Carol's careful 8 months of thought, a locked door, a half-painted room, a card with handwriting in the corner. That version we told to people we trusted, and they always had the same response, which was that Carol was a remarkable woman who should have been running something. I drove to Carol's shop in April, the 1-year mark of the day Joanna and I had first met for coffee. I didn't call ahead. I walked in with a bag of good coffee beans and a card that said nothing elaborate, just, "Thank you for saying the thing." She looked at the card. She looked at me. She had the glasses pushed up on her head again, the same as the first morning. Paint on her sleeve replaced now by a seam she'd been working. "You're doing well," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "Good," she said, and handed me back the card because she is the kind of woman who doesn't need the documentation. "Now sit down and tell me how she's doing. She never tells me enough." I sat down. I told her. She listened with the full attention of someone who loves the person being described and wants the honest version, not the managed one. Outside the shop window, the street was doing its ordinary April things. The coffee I'd brought was better than the shop's usual, and she said so, which I knew from 2 years of knowing her meant she found it acceptable. Nothing important had arrived from nowhere. It had been built quietly and with intention by a woman who had looked at the information she had and decided to act on it, and by 2 people who had been ready for something steady without quite knowing they were ready until it was in the room. I still think about the locked door, not with strangeness, just with the understanding that some conversations require an environment that won't let either person leave before the thing gets said. Carol knew that. She prepared the room and she closed the door and she said the thing. The rest of it was ours. What would you have done if the mother of your ex pulled you aside and said something you weren't expecting and turned out to be completely right? And have you ever had someone in your life who saw something in you before you were ready to see it yourself? Tell me in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.